kids don't want to be doctors or lawyers. Everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. Everyone wants the trips, the planes, the cars, the green, baby. But how do you do it? How do you get it? Welcome to Brain Drop. Brain Drop. The ultimate podcast where we bring you the secrets and strategies of 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs who've mastered the art of growing their companies through cutting-edge marketing and sales tactics. It's not about lame theories. It's about actionable, proven tactics that'll take your business to new heights. This is Brain Drop. Brain Drop. And now your host, Joshua T. Osborne.
Welcome to Brain Drop, where I like to bring you the best guests possible, either around sales, marketing, scaling. Today I have a very special guest, somebody close to my heart that I brought onto my team 2 years ago now. And this man, I actually found him wandering around online. He was just kind of homeless, running around. He was just kind of homeless, running around, hanging out with, Cole Gordon and Todd Brown and just some of those other big names that you see around. But he was in there helping them with their sales and now is in here running my teams. Watch this man bring a lot of impact, a lot of heart, change a lot of culture for the better. And this man loves better than anybody I know. And just to give you guys an idea of what I believe love is, love at the end of the day, when you break down the characteristics of it, is just positive reinforcement. And I'm telling you, anytime you get around this man, no matter what, he's positively reinforcing what you're doing, what you want in life, and helping you achieve it every single day, pushing you up that hill, helping you up that hill. And so with that, I want to welcome Steve Smaridge to the show.
Thanks for having me, man. So happy to be here.
Absolutely.
I will say thank you very much for having me here, and hopefully do a good enough job that you will have me back. So reinforcing me being here.
Reinforcing me being here. Well, I want to start this show out today because a lot of people watching this right now, usually they're small businesses, they're just getting started. Some of them, they're starting to just now start to scale a team. Maybe they're a business owner wearing every hat like they do when they first start out. So they're doing sales, they're doing market, they're doing everything, But I wanted to start out with the sales side because we all know that no matter what, this is all just a fucking hobby unless we're making sales, right? And you've done such a great job for me. I mean, you've done over 600,000 cash in the door for me in a single month. You've done over 1.5 million revenue for me. And you've not just me, but you've done it with person after person after person, right? Furthermore, you have a Maury Sales. I've watched you in there with, new agency owners, people with brand new businesses in there. And the biggest thing that I've seen you help them with is overcome their fear, because fear is the first thing that hits us when we go in and we start making the sale. So I wanted to just start the day off with you just talking about how you walk so many, because it was like, I watched like 36 students, and I think over 30 of them got their first sales within the fucking first 30 days. You know what I mean? It was ridiculous. And I want you to share with everybody how you did that. How did you make that happen?
So great intro. And so the one core thing that I have found when it comes to making the first sale is setting the goal of making the first sale. And so oftentimes entrepreneurs, they get into this or call it pre-entrepreneurs. So people who are pre-revenue, they do a lot of questions and a lot of asking of well, how am I going to scale this to $100,000? Or how am I going to scale this to $1 million? Or what's it going to look like when I have a team? Or what's it going to look like? But all of these questions ignore the fact that not one person has given you money yet. And so until you have somebody give you money for this thing, the service that you will provide to them, you don't have a business. And so you can't ask the questions of what will it look like at $100,000 a month. You can't ask the questions of how will I scale it? What do I do with my taxes? All these complicated questions that realistically you don't need to answer. The core focus only should be, how do I tell strangers what do I do? And so what I really like to focus on is equipping people with the language to use to communicate what it is that they do. And then also realize that anything that they're telling themselves, and so language is I'll just unpack language for a second, because language to communicate what it is that you do to somebody else or for somebody else more specifically, in addition to that, language that you use to communicate to yourself. Yeah. And so the first session that we did, and it was probably the thing that I was the most proud of in my life for doing was like with this launch is we had 17 people within the first 24 hours after the workshop make efforts and land clients. Yeah. And it was incredible. And I think the biggest reason for that though is that like there was so much pent up energy and so much just, okay, I will do it, but, and then I just ignored the buts and just said, yes, you will do this. And so you introed this with like positive reinforcement, and where I take the stance of that, like I reinforce and I love people in a way that they, like I try to see the best in them. And so I try to speak into a sense of like, if this is the thing that you want, and the only thing that is stopping you from getting there is the language that you're communicating to yourself, then we can just solve how you talk to yourself so that you can talk to other people. And that was the primary thing of like people unpacking people's fears and I basically just overcame objections with 30 different people of like, tell me, like, what's your butt? Like, what's your reason why you're not doing this? And to them, one of two things happens. Either they say it out loud and they go, oh, wait a second. Or they get reframed into a position of making it useful. So I look at this of like, I can have, you hear the term often of like, some people are driven by running away from the stick. Other people are driven from chasing the carrot. But humans run away from pain and chase pleasure. And. Yes. And is the huge word there. And I think a lot of people forget that it's an and, not an or. And so what I tried to do is realize that like you have big audacious goal, you have thing you run away from, and only focusing on one is going to cripple you in the other direction. So there was this one study that was done. They had a rat in a cage, and what they did is they had cheese on one side, and then the rat started to pull towards the cheese. And they measured like how hard the rat was pulling. And so then they measured like how long it did it for, basically the power output of the rat or the mouse. And then what they did is they added a cat behind the mouse. And the mouse pulled harder for longer, generated more force. So it had cheese and a cat behind it. And so in realizing, and so it's like, so then people get weird. They're like, are you just telling me I'm a mouse in a box? I'd be like, yes. Absolutely. Yes, exactly. This is exactly what I say. And that to me is incredibly useful because then we can just analyze, well, what words am I using to myself that I associate to be painful, and what do I run away from? And then what words do I use with myself to associate pleasure, and which of those do I run towards? And so the whole first workshop is really just about like language of like understanding like what is actual reality, what is the real observable truth, rather than like my inherent truth or like whatever I have been validated to believe. What is the real observable reality? And then what words do we use to describe that? And the more that we can just base this in fact, the higher likelihood that we have in doing the thing that is required to accomplish the result that we wish for. So if somebody wishes to have $100,000 a month, that becomes very crippling because they are at zero. And when you have 100,000, or you have a measurement of 100,000 to where you would like to go, that is overwhelming for a lot of people. But I just make the goal, and I really reinforce like the number one thing you should be doing is your first client, and make that the goal. And then whatever you run away from there, whether it's like you're afraid of like what somebody thinks or you're afraid of somebody saying no, then we can unpack that individually. And so I like to make the goal very attainable and very realistic, rather than answering all these complicated questions of like, what makes a scalable offer that I will eventually sell one day? It's like, get somebody to pay you money. And I try to simplify it as much as possible as I reject complexity in my life in a lot of different cases. And last night we had a very good conversation of like, laziness is a strong character trait of like, I will choose to do the easy thing because I find that if things are complicated, I do not do well with complication. I would prefer to do the big, dumb, obvious thing, and I would prefer to do a lot of it. And I would prefer if other people took that same approach. So the point number one there, and I think the way that I got all these repetitions was like a pretty funny story, is that I worked for a company that at the time they hired me, and they were doing like $30 million a year, and I applied for the job in a very odd way. they were not hiring, and I went to the CEO, and he had a post on his Facebook page, and it was something to the effect of like, Rice Krispies are delicious. I was like, I'm going to get you. So I outbounded him. I said, have you ever had a Canadian Rice Krispie? They're the exact same, just by the way. We don't have different Rice Krispies. And I outbounded him, and I said, hey, man, let me send you some Canadian Rice Krispies. And in that, I sent him Rice Krispies. I got his address, and I filmed a video, and I linked that video on a physical letter, and I put it as a QR code. And I just said, it's like, hey, I ironed my shirt if you wouldn't mind checking out this video or something like that. And so he watched the video, and it was me just like applying to the job. And he called me, and he was like, look, man, like I appreciate the effort, but we're not hiring. I was like, I will do anything. And so he was like, well, we're really scaling fast, and we have all these people who it's like they're not a perfect fit. They don't really have their offer validated, but like we're working with them. We're doing the best that we can. I was like, I will get them results. Like, just give them to me. I don't care. And so I was the only ever junior account manager. I never got promoted, so I still went through that entire time that I was there as the junior account manager. And with that, they would assign me all these business owners who really didn't have an offer. They didn't really have a business. They didn't have anything they didn't really have anything. They had an idea.
Yeah.
Sometimes they didn't even have that. They were just like, I want to make money. I'm like, great, don't we all? What can you do?
Where's your value?
Yeah. And so let's start with that. And in realizing that and talking to so many people who, one didn't even have an idea, I realized that everybody can sell anything. And so you have skills, whether that skill is a skill that will accomplish a $100,000 business, who's to say? But if you have been hired to do a job by somebody else, you can just have other people hire you to do that same job. So for example, if you're a copywriter in a company or you're a graphic designer in a company, what I would work on with people is teaching them how to create a structure in which they could become a freelancer. And then that freelancing business then would overtake what they were doing in their 9-to-5. Yep. And so that those repetitions that I accumulated over the course of being the only junior account manager is I was able to help so many people get off the ground and get that 0 to 1. And that happened from just number one, making sure that they were able to stay within reality of these are the things that you have. Rather than making the goal of $100,000 a month, let's make the goal of telling people this. These are the skills that you have. Let's just go tell other people that you can help them with this way. And you can have the benefit of they would just like you more or something to that effect, and creating that relationship rather than creating an exceptional marketing message or whatever. And so business owners will always require people who have high skills to provide them. That is how businesses grow. And so you can do one of two things. You can go and so that's one thing. If you choose to go B2B, if you choose to go B2C, people will always have problems.
Always.
100% of people will always have a problem, except for this guy. And
Yeah.
The only people that do not have problems look like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm trying more and more to look like that every day.
Right. And when you're in a position in which you have no problems, great. I'm super proud of you. But that doesn't really happen in America. It doesn't really happen in Western culture.
At
because
all.
No.
Not even a little bit. I want to go back to something though that you said a while ago, and that's language and the power of language. Because I believe that is the most important thing that we have to overcome. And so you started digging in a little bit, but then you kind of jumped forward about the way that people talk to themselves. So if you had to walk somebody through the way or switching up the way in which they talk about, which essentially is switching up their belief system at the end of the day, because without the new belief, they're not going to continue to talk to themselves well. How do you go through that with somebody?
Nice. So I glaze over these things because I get emotional when I talk about them. In my opinion, because we are not taught how to speak to ourselves, and we have such a vast amount of vocabulary to describe different circumstances, we have a wide variety of words to select from to label circumstances as negative. And when we have negative circumstances that we use, so you could use a tsunami as an example, is people will call that as horrible, terrible, awful, and I would agree. A tsunami knocking out 100,000 homes in some country that I've never heard of, that's horrible. But if I take that same word and I use it to describe the most horrific thing that I could think of, and I use that same word to describe my own ability to do something, well, I've labeled myself to be horrible, and because I don't have a word worse than that to describe who I am, I will begin to make connections and act as if I am horrible. And that is where, in my opinion, a lot of like self-hatred comes from, is because when you label yourself as horrible, or you label yourself as not worthy, not good enough, whatever label you choose to establish to yourself. Like for me, I had the label of like piece of shit for the longest time. And I would behave in accordance to that. And so in establishing in realizing the labels that you attribute to yourself, and then removing those, and then actually establishing like what are reasonable words to use to describe the situation. And so if you do not accomplish what you set out to accomplish, does that make you horrible?
No.
Correct. Yeah. But we use these words to describe the situation, and then we act in accordance to that. And so somebody may label themselves as horrible and then go ahead and proceed to do horrible things to themselves, because that's the label that is what they are. That is the label that they have placed over themselves. And we always act in accordance to what we hold true and the values that we hold to ourselves.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of sales coaching really just comes down to, and I got this all from objections, because I would study objections. Like over the past 4 years, I've done thousands of call reviews. And you would see, especially in the coaching industry, you would see like how people would speak to themselves.
Yeah. Horrible.
Yeah.
It's fucking horrible.
Yeah.
I'm like, you can never succeed like this. There's just no way.
Yep. And when you hold those values and you only have those words to label yourself with, you set up an equation that is only negative. And it's very hard to break through or break yourself out of that unless you are educated on what you're doing. And so number one is like awareness of the fact that it is occurring, yep. And then giving yourself rational counters to that word. And so rather than you are horrible because you did not complete a task on time, it's like figure out what were the actual circumstances or what was the block to not complete that task. And then once you can solve for that, you can give yourself a clear set of instructions to ensure or decrease the probability that that same thing happens again. Yeah. So I always take the approach of like, let's look at solving the problem. And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to remove your opinions, your inherent negative opinions about yourself. Yep. And then that way you can attack the problem violently rather than attack yourself violently.
Yeah, and most people are just attacking themselves constantly. I mean, when you go out there and look at, I obviously consult with a lot of businesses, and I consult with businesses that are doing $50 million a year, right? And when you go in there, even the owners are still at the point to where they still have some negative self-talk. And it's like, no, if I can just get rid of that negative self-talk and I can turn it into some kind of positive affirmation or a new belief, right? Mm-hmm. The company just takes off immediately, because they're already taking actions. But for some reason, that language in which they're speaking to themselves has stopped them from being successful in that singular zone. Mm. And so once you replace it, they take off in that zone, and the company just kind of thrives. And so it's super cool. I've dug into language so much, the history of language, and you go all the way back. You look at it now, and like, I know you don't watch too much news. I don't either. And there's a reason for that, because we don't want that language. We don't want that entering our minds, our bodies, our souls, right? Mm-hmm. And so for most of you that are watching the fucking news or spending time, it's like look at where you're spending your time. Look at what you're allowing to come in, because that language is power, and that's power over you, even to get you to think about the way that you view Nike, or the way that you view in the NFL if something's going on there, or this or that. And so that's entering you. That's becoming a part of you, right? Because we're all just vibration at the end of the day. And so it's like it's becoming a part of you. And I think you have to be very clear on keeping that stuff away from you, right? You see the way that I walk around here, I just listen to music, you know what I mean? I try to keep in my own zone, I guess is how you would call it. And that's been probably the biggest blessing in my life. I know up until about 3 years ago, I was watching the news still. I was still worried about politics and what was happening with the presidential elections and all that shit. And it's like the second I got rid of that, things just started to fly for me. And I realized that I was using that language that was being fed to me and those things that were being fed to me to feed myself negative self-talk and to give myself a way out. right? Of not performing and not doing my best and not putting it all online. And you almost give up control. Do you see that a lot as well?
Often. And so I think that when you realize that you have power over your own words, you can give yourself back control. And so when you completely reject, which you have done an exceptional job of like rejecting negative influences, or at least people who use negative words to describe situations. And I always like dramatization. So like big blown up words or like hyperbolic claims to describe a situation of like not enough, not good enough, etc. And that, to me, when you make the connection of like, don't you feel like you're not enough? It's like, yeah, I'm not enough. And you make this agreement with yourself because whatever, it was a conference or somebody had like some sort of influence that you agreed with at that time. And, or the worst case scenario is that like somebody puts that label on you and you never question their judgment.
Yes.
And so I was at a mastermind last week, and this woman said to me, she goes, I'm not a numbers person. I'm like, that sounds like a thing that you've said enough times, and everybody else has nodded their heads. But have you ever stopped to question what that even means? Like, what does a numbers person even look like? Like, you are currently looking at numbers.
Yeah.
These are numbers. You're a person. I'm confused by this label. And in that moment, I just saw her like whole face just like, oh my gosh. I've never questioned this before.
Yeah.
And so like these labels that you place on yourself, I think can, number one, they can propel you forward. Of like, there's the most common question that has been asked in at least Christian human history of like, what would Jesus do? And I just love that question of like, or I love the philosophy behind that question, because it gives you something that you can conceptualize of like, what would somebody who is altruistic do in this situation? And I always like the question of like, what would the superhero of my movie do? Like Joe Rogan had that great ad. It was like, be the hero of your own movie. I was like, oh man, I love superhero movies. I totally get it. And so like, what would the hero of my own movie do in this situation? And the more that you can stack those up, rather than like, what would piece of shit Steve do in this situation? Or what would the no good Steve do in this situation? And so I just see it as when you reject influences of negativity, which is, you know, sometimes people have a difficult time doing that because like they think about the relationships that they would have to give up. I don't think it's that. I just think that you realize the other words that people use and how it cripples them, and then you do not allow that crippling to occur to you.
Correct.
And so I'm sure that you have people in your life that like you tolerate rather than you take influence from. 100%. And so like those people, you can observe the language that they use. And is it worth it to like coach them? And maybe not, but I know that I'm worth it.
Yeah.
And I know that I'm not going to allow that to influence me and how I behave.
Yeah, 100%. Environment is so huge. And I know you said, you know, you don't have to end every relationship, but it is smart to go through and gut out some people that are in your life that aren't positively moving you forward, right? So I look at like people in my life, like about 5 years ago now, have a sister. I like almost said had as the past tense, but it's have a sister named Amanda. You know, me and her were close growing up and all that kind of stuff. But 5 years ago, I made the decision because she was an extreme taker, and every time you talk to her is negativity, this and that. And I made a decision, told Dee, very calmly, I wasn't emotional about it. I just said, hey, I don't want to involve this person in my life anymore. And I wasn't mean to him or anything like that, but I stopped communicating, right? Stopped texting every day, stopped doing all of that kind of stuff. Now we don't talk at all, but it's helped my life. I've noticed, like Dee even mentioned it to me just the other day. She goes, ever since you cut Amanda off, it's like you got 10 more hours a week. It's like it's just so much extra time and so much. And so I do believe in creating the environment in which is going to help you thrive instead of staying in environments that pull you down, right? Environment is very important. Vibration is very important. And so I believe that you do have control of that. And so don't just leave it to listening to somebody every single day if you shouldn't be, because I believe that can affect you as well. But there are people in my life in which they bring value in certain areas and I don't respect them in other areas. And so when they're speaking in those areas, I usually just walk away or I don't listen or I don't take it in, right? And so I think that's what you're kind of getting to. But a lot of people watching this right now, you would benefit. I promise you would benefit if you just went through a list of every meaningful conversation or relationship that you're going to have over the next 12 months and really make sure that it's meaningful. Make sure that there's actually something of value there, that there's positivity there, that there's people that are bringing you up instead of bringing you down. And if you just changed your environment, just that alone, you would leaps and bounds, 1,000% on your life. Just like that. So, cool. That was a freaking good place to open.
Agreed. Just to close that loop, like I just, you said something so valuable, is that you got back 10 hours. And so it's like, we could look at like, well, what have you been doing with that 10 hours? And then, there's this, the railroad question of like, if you have the ability to push somebody in front of a moving train and it would save thousands of people, would you do it? And then it's like, well, how far back do I have to go? And like, who's the person or whatever. But like that, for lack of a better term, trade-off has allowed you to impact thousands of more people.
Yeah.
Because 1 hour of your time, you can spend that 1 hour creating a product that has the potential to move mountains. Yeah. And you think about like how much you've been able to do in that time of, would you rather have this relationship or influence every 20-year-old in the country?
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, okay, so like having that payoff, and it's really hard to look at the payoff rather than like what you lose. I also like to communicate to people of like, think about what you will gain and think about what others will gain from it as well. So, and I think that like with the 10 hours that you have per week back in your day, things have gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
For a lot of people.
For a ton of people. Which is great. And like I said, it doesn't have to be everybody. I didn't cut out everybody that was negative, like you said. I have value. There's value in which too, to where it's like it brings to your heart. So you know what I mean? Like you see my brother running around here. He's not the most positive person, but I love him, and for my heart, it's worth it to keep him around and keep talking to him and keep just coaching him the best I can and just loving on him, right? Mm-hmm. And so those trade-offs are worth it. You know what I mean? And so it doesn't have to be a monetary increase as well. Just somebody that's positive, that's not dragging you down, that actually cares about your well-being and wants to bring you up, you know? And so that's really good. I want to move into, oh, damn it. I want to move into next. I kind of want to go into fitness, only because you're a big buff hippie.
Amazing.
And so I want to kind of move into that direction, because I believe that a lot of us, and there's a lot of business owners out there right now that you know as well, that we sacrifice our fitness, our health, to build a business, to try to have impact, to get in there. And so sometimes you walk in and you see these business owners are doing $5 to $10 million a year, and you're like, man, he's got everything down. He's got his Google Sheets, he's got his systems, he's got this, he's got that, he's got it. And you're like, whoa. And then he's 375 fucking pounds like I was, right? And so like, how important when it comes to business, when it comes to life, when it comes to sales, is fitness for you? And I've seen you coach other people in it as well. You're coaching me right now. He was just in here making me fucking burn out, bro. I was like, no, I don't want to burn out. Steve, stop it. And so like, how important do you think that is to a balanced life?
For me, very important. And so I gain a lot of reward from fitness. I love exercise. I make the joke of like, for the past 5 years, I've just been squatting and business has occurred. And I just like, every time I'm squatting, I'm like, oh my goodness. Okay. Now I'm in Colorado squatting. This is cool. Good stuff. And so to me, fitness has always been, it's never fallen outside of my top 3 priorities, is that, and I know one thing to be true about myself is that if I sleep well, if I get a good workout in, if I have a low resting heart rate, I feel incredible. And when I feel incredible, I get a lot more done. And so I look at fitness as like a multiplier to every other business endeavor that I take on. And I also think that there's something really to be said about like strength as a character trait. And I look at the ways that you can develop strength, and you might say is that like, there's the argument that can be made of like, if you push a sled, the only thing that you get better at is pushing the sled. I think that it also helps you with stress tolerance, frustration tolerance, because when negative things happen or situations occur, it is not nearly as painful as the workout I put myself through in the morning.
Yeah, the 13th fucking rep that you just made, that didn't feel good. I thought I was going to die.
And so I just like exposure to stressful situations so that when I'm faced with stressful situations or circumstances that demand more of me, I have more to give. And I think is that like when I have more to give, my limit in terms of tolerance and what I can tolerate is a lot higher. And I like to think about like fitness as the multiplier in terms of like my relationships, my ability to perform, my business. And so and I know, I also feel like I don't speak anything new. It's just I prioritize it, and I will always prioritize it, because one thing that is very important to me, I have goals, I have things that I wish to accomplish, but like, my gosh, I just love living the days that I have, because life is so short, and to constantly be chasing something outside of where I am now feels very difficult for me anyways. And so I just know the days that I work out are way better than the days that I do not. And I always feel better after a workout. It it gives me a sense of accomplishment. My energy feels better. Like I just look at all the benefits that I have for that day in isolation. And I don't think that I make this joke to entrepreneurs. It's like, have you ever gone for a walk and felt worse by the time you got back? No. No, not once. It's like you go for a walk and like you're like, oh, I'm not going to shut down my business. Yep. I'm going to make this hard phone call or whatever it may be. And so I just look at the extrapolation of that of like, well, if I am in good health, great. But I also just love the workout. Yeah. And I love how I feel after the workout. And I love the benefits that I receive from it. I love the praise that I get for like my physique. Like I love being proud of myself for doing it. Like 2 years ago, I had 15-inch arms. And I was like, okay, Steve, your quads are the size of like tree trunks. Let's work on your arms. Like, let's just spend some time, look a little bit more balanced. Cool. And so over the past 2 years, I've really, really focused on like arm training.
You can tell.
And thank you. Yeah, appreciate it. And over those past 2 years, I've put on like 3 inches onto my arms. And so now they're 18 inches, which is like, and so I also get the reward from like being able to delay the cookie as well. Of like, I will not have 21-inch arms anytime soon, but boy, does it ever give me something to work towards. Yeah. And I just love that. Like so the benefit that I get in the day-to-day, more energy, more focus, more emotional regulation. And then I also get the benefit of the long-term of like, I have a goal to work towards. And I always have something that I can modulate based off of like, how committed am I to myself? And I always like the reframe of like, if I am committed to myself, I will do what somebody who's committed to themselves looks like. And to me, that is just working out. Yeah. So.
Well, let's dig into that a little bit further, because I've even watched, and I know the whole time that you were making I statements, by the way. But I believe that it doesn't just go for you. This goes for everyone, because I've watched you, like I watch salespeople. Obviously, you teach them skill, you teach them all that kind of stuff. But most of the time when you're coaching them, it's like, well, did you work out today? Yeah. Well, did you drink water? Well, did you? And then they're like, no, I didn't. And then you're like, well, I'm going to have to go ahead and put you on a PIP for working out. And so it's like,
true story.
you want a performance improvement plan? We're just going to track your workouts. How about that? Yeah. And then every morning you're like, did you work out? You didn't send me a fucking picture in the gym. Yeah. And it's like those people, they just immediate turnaround. You just watch it just by drinking water, sleeping well, working out. Yeah. And then they show up differently.
It's such a because it's also just, you set a promise to yourself and you keep it. Yeah. And what is sales? You're saying, hey, please make this promise to yourself. Well, hang on, dude. Your hair's weird. Your bed's not made. You're not in good shape. Like, I don't know if I can take advice from you. And there's that like visual of like other people perceive you differently. And there's also just the ability to like look at somebody and be like, I've done everything that I needed to do to take care of myself today. I'm in a great mood. And I've done every promise that I've set out for myself, I've kept. And when you have that level of conviction in yourself, you have a way higher influence over somebody else. And
100%. It's a mental. It's what you tell yourself too.
Mm-hmm.
The second you start working out, the second that you're sleeping well, the second that you're drinking water, the second you're taking care of yourself at that level, you start speaking to yourself different.
Yes.
Right? And then you can speak to others different, right? It's all back to that language.
Yep.
It's like this rotation. But I think those three are key at the
Agreed.
end of the day. And I didn't believe that before meeting you, but watching the way in which you've coached and really helped grow people, it's really those three are key.
Yes.
And go ahead.
I will just say, speaking as somebody who used to write blogs about why gluten is evil, there's really only like 3 things you need to do. Like, get a good night of sleep, drink some water, and ideally when you wake up, get some sunshine. And if you do those 3 things, like, now what's really difficult is to like hold yourself accountable to it, which is where, in my opinion, coaching comes into a factor.
Yeah.
And so the mechanism that has the highest bang for buck and highest rate of return is just those 3 things. And so then you can solve like, well, why do I not do these 3 things? Like, what's in the way or what's stopping me from doing it? But if I could figure out a way to package those 3 things, like go for a walk in the sunlight, go to bed at the same time every night, and ideally stay a little bit hydrated. If I could package those 3 things, I would have more money than any other human in the world. And it's really like, there's no complication behind it. The complication comes from the stories that you tell yourself as to why you're putting it off.
Yeah.
And then the stories that you tell yourself, and then the stories that you tell other people. Yeah. And then depending on who it is will reinforce you for those stories. Yeah. And so if you have somebody in your life who it's like if you complain to not going to the gym to somebody who hasn't been to the gym in 6 months, oh yeah, well, come on, like, it's difficult. You gotta get back to it. But remember, in high school, it's the same thing. Like, and so they will also make themselves feel nice in that moment, and then you will both realize that it's like, oh, okay, well, it's not a high level of importance. Yeah. And so then, but if you ask somebody who it's like they do maintain a good, healthy lifestyle, they only speak of the benefits. And they get really weird in terms of like talking down to people of like, well, yeah, you should be doing this, because it's like there's also like this guilt that plays into a factor to it. So I just speak the benefits. And so it's like I do make a lot of I statements because I just know that it works for me. And I inherently don't want to place guilt or blame on anybody for not accomplishing it or like keeping those promises. I will say, though, that like if you could bottle up sleep, same night or same time every night, and a walk in the morning, even those 2 things, I'll like put water like as a secondary. Those 2 things, you will accomplish more than you will even know what to do with.
Yeah. And I seen the same thing, by the way, in the Maury group. I noticed people were posting photos of them walking every morning. And so like you kind of lead with those. I don't know if you do that or you knew that about yourself, but you kind of lead with those. But the cool thing is they work, and they work so well because people, like you said, you probably start getting those endorphins released as you're starting to walk every day. You're drinking water, you're getting enough sleep at night, starting to feel good about yourself. You can then switch your language out, and then the language starts coming out in your head about yourself, and then you're like, oh, I can do this, and then you reach out in your language to that person, you communicate really well, and then you land a fucking deal. Yeah. And now you have a business and not a hobby. Right?
Yes. And bingo.
And that's what you're aiming for. So super freaking cool. Let's get into higher level stuff. Meaning like when you're working with business owners and you're working with, what is some of the most common things that you see that need to be overcome in a business? Whether people, because there are people on here as well that are watching that are doing $500,000 a year, or $1 million a year, or this or that, and now they're talking scale. So So what are some of the biggest common pitfalls that you see business owners that are at that level, that maybe just kicking off a sales team and they got a couple people underneath them, and they need some help with leadership or whatever it is? What are some of the common pitfalls you see with them, and how can you help them through that?
Oh man, my favorite. I love this question, and no matter what business or no matter what level I find the business to be at, the one clear lacking piece of that business in order for it to hit the next level is a clear set of instructions. And so that just means like if you have a leader on your team and they do not have clear instructions on how you wish for them to lead their team, they will just make it up. And then you will look at that department and be like, why is this a disaster? Like, I stepped away for 6 weeks. I trusted you with this. Like, what the hell? And you wait too long to address the issue, and you don't know what the issue is. And so then that department, like, will be underperforming or whatever. And so the one key thing is instructions. And as simple as that sounds, but nobody does it. People will just hire people, and they will say, yeah, I really need help with this, and I need you to take on these tasks, and I need you to oversee this, with very vague outcomes. And they will use KPIs and scorecards, but there's not a clear measurement on how to do the thing. It's just get the thing done or else. And that or else then leads to the person who is doing the role never knowing if they're doing the right thing, never seeking reinforcement if they're on the right track. And they will then begin to create superstitions with themselves. It's what the right thing actually looks like, which is different from what the right thing looks like to you. And so my strong recommendation of that, if you look at a piece of, and you can really optimize for what department it is specifically. And when you analyze, just looking at the data of, okay, this department is the clear one that's falling behind. Yeah. So we have great sales, we've got great marketing, but our customer retention is falling short. Well, fulfillment. And so it's okay, well, what part of the fulfillment process is it? And then is there a clear instruction on how to solve this problem? Or is there a clear instruction on how to do this correctly, I should say? And with a clear instruction on how to do it correctly, or at least the least amount of wrong, then the person who is operating it can follow those instructions. And human beings love instructions. Yeah. I love a good instruction. I love when people tell me what to do. As much as we get into entrepreneurship and we're don't tell me what to do, it's
tell me what
no.
to do.
Please.
Please tell me what to do.
Please, for the love of God. And so it was really funny is that entrepreneurs will say something, or I've heard a few entrepreneurs say something to the effect of yeah, I just need to know what to do and I'll do it. But great. That's the biggest, don't we all wish we had that? Yeah. And so as the entrepreneur, you realize that you've acquired all this repetition through different departments and leading different ways and doing all these things, but you didn't write any of it down. Yeah. And the second that you write it down and explain, these are the ways that I want you to do this task, and then when it is not done that way, you're not the enemy, you're not the one coming down on the subordinate, you're the one who's just reinforcing the instruction of hey, look, there was a clear way that I wanted you to do this. You went and you did something completely different. Help me understand, are the instructions unclear? Did you not understand what to do? What was the block, or was there a block that stopped you from following the instructions? Yeah. And then that way you can solve to the effect of why are you not following the instructions rather than why are you not getting the job done? Yeah. So then, and then if the instructions
suck.
One
is an argument, the other is.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then if your instructions are in a position of if you wrote the instructions and it didn't work, then you're to blame. And that is why you're an entrepreneur. It's because you should own 100% of the blame for whatever goes wrong and not blame your subordinates. And so that way, when you write the instructions and they don't follow them, then that is you as a leader to figure out ways to motivate them to follow them. Or it is a way, or if they follow the instructions to a T and they didn't get the result, that means that you wrote the wrong instructions. Either way, it gives you the control to solve the problem rather than relying on somebody else to do it.
Absolutely. So yeah, 100%. And so in our company, I've watched you, we've created KPIs, standards, all kinds of stuff. And one thing that I absolutely love about it is the fact that, before when you kind of run most business owners that are watching this right now, you run by just the seat of your pants at the end of the day. You're I don't like that, so you're fired, or I don't like that, so do this. I don't like, and it's and so at the end of the day, you're responsible for that person because you've got to take full responsibility for your company, for everything that goes on. So if they're not doing something, then it's your fault if you fire them because you're just a bad leader at the end of the day, right? But if you have these KPIs, if you have these standards, then you just look at them and say, why didn't you do this? And if they don't do it, then did you fire them or did they fire themselves is the question. And I feel once we had the documentation, once we had the standards, the KPIs, and everything that went into it, of getting all that documented, people showed up differently. Mm-hmm. Just immediately, right? It's just the second that they have a KPI of I have to hit this many units, this much cash in the door, this much revenue, etc., they just said, okay, I'm going to do it. And then the consistency that came with it created a culture that it's unfuckable with. And so it's been amazing to be a part of that, to see that, to really enjoy it at the end of the day. And be a part of it. I mean, being in there and like sitting down and figuring out, what is this KPI? Should the KPI change? Should this? And I feel like that's a lot of fun as well. And it's a lot of pressure at first, because you don't want to set too high of KPIs or too high of standards, and then people not be able to show up. Maybe your lead flow falls off, and then you have to deal with that, right? So it makes you a better leader at the end of the day. I think that's essentially what documentation and all that does. It makes them better human beings, and them be able to show up at a level in which they've never showed up before, and the consistency in their life in which they've never had, and they get that growth. And we all know that we need love, connection, and growth. And so you're able to provide them with that growth, but you're able to provide yourself with growth. And I think that's just as important. You get the growth of being a better leader from that. And so that's super cool. Cool. So moving even further, I want to talk to you a little bit about Amori Sales. Okay. So tell everybody, just so you guys know, Steve obviously runs my sales teams. He runs other sales teams. He's doing all kinds of stuff out there online, probably working with people that he can't even mention, from NDAs and all kinds of shit. But either way, I want him, he released this course called Amori Sales, helping everyday business owners just like you or me, being able to go out and either land your first sale online, build your sales team, setters, whatever you need in order to have this be a business, be profitable, and not be a hobby. And I want him to share a little bit about that group, about why you came up with it in the first place, because I know you make enough money without it. Like right now, I know how much money I fucking pay you, and I pay you more than any human can spend in a month. And so it's like, okay, awesome, right? And so you don't need more money. That's not why you're doing it. You've always led with love. And so I want you to share a little bit about why you came up with this, why you're sharing, why you're trying to give back.
Nice. So I really wish to create more ownership that people have over the life that they have. And I think that if you have the ability if you have a skill and somebody says that I will pay you $4,000 a month for this skill, then you can accept that. Or you could find somebody who will pay you more money for that skill. And you could find 4 people who will pay you $4,000 a month for that skill. Or you could find 10 people who will pay you $1,000 a month for that skill. And I think that the constraint that people experience when it comes to solving that problem is number one, they don't have the language in order to communicate what it is that they do. And they think that businesses are some like magic box in which leads come in and leads go out and sales happen. But in reality, it's a simple equation of the amount of people who know you, the amount of people who can benefit from what you do, and how many offers you make to the people who can benefit to what you do. And so I wish to help people solve that equation. And it doesn't matter like what service you are able to provide. Like as a freelancer, I know plenty of successful freelancers who are like, they charge $12,000 a client and they work for like 4 hours a week. And you can really scale a freelancing business and have like a great lifestyle business of, you have like Tim Ferriss has like this 4-hour work week. And I just look at that of like, well, if the only people that you are accountable to is your handful of clients and you enjoy working with those clients, then you've really set yourself up to maximize the amount of income that you make for the skill that you have. And you also have the lowest amount of hours that you can work because you have such high leverage to pull. And so the main lever that I wish to help people understand is that like you can communicate to strangers what it is that you do and present an offer that they will likely say yes to, as long as you solve a problem in a reasonable way for them. And that to me, that feels like a good mission for me to accomplish, honestly, of like if there's more education surrounding like you can make more money for the skills that you already have, meaning you don't have to learn anything else.
Nothing. Yeah.
You can just understand the equation that it takes to get strangers to pay you money for a skill that you already have. And so that way, like I take the stance of like, I would love to create every business in the world that leads through praise rather than punishment. And so one of two things is going to happen. Either that happens and all the businesses in the world do that, or people begin very quickly realizing that like my boss sucks.
Really quick.
He's yelling at everybody, like, why am I even staying here? And they stay because of the paycheck.
Yeah.
And they stay because of the safety. And I just wish to give people the opportunity to be a freelancer, to have a very like solopreneur operation in which they are only accountable to themselves and their handful of clients, and they can make the same, if not more money, working less time reporting to somebody who they respect, which ideally is themselves. Yeah. And so I try to think about this of like, you know, how can I create a top-down approach from leaders to provide clear instructions and then reinforced in the instructions? And then it's like, well, that's a pretty big goal. And that's going to take a lot of time and a lot of education. And so in the meantime, I think it's also important that like we as subordinates and we as like 9-to-5 employees, whatever, like contractors, whoever, you also have the ability to refuse that and say, you know what, I'm not going to tolerate punishment, because this department, sales specifically, is a very high punishment department. Because oftentimes what happens is the sales team will be on pace for about 4 hours out of a 30-day month. And so the only question that is asked to the sales team is, why are we behind pace? What's going on? Are you guys not doing this? What the hell? Like, make me more money. And that is the leadership approach that a lot of sales managers and business owners take to their sales team, because they don't have. And so one, I wish to take that kind of department and help those sales reps find other opportunities. And I also just wish to extrapolate that to other departments. And so if you're a graphic designer and your boss is yelling at you and you don't have a good work environment and like you don't feel like you're able to establish a lot of creativity through the team, and you're really not like living in alignment, like the work that you do is in alignment to who you are and what you want to be doing, but the environment that you're in is not conducive to alignment, then I just wish to bridge that gap for people and teach them the way that they can go find alignment for themselves. Yeah. And whether that's like they have a couple other small clients, or you know they're part of a couple different organizations, or they're just really helping another small business grow. So the reason why it's so important to me is because the large vision is every single business owner provides their subordinates clear instructions and then reinforces with compensation, praise, high five, pizza parties, whatever, that when they follow the instructions, they get closer and everybody has a good time. And the people who do not buy into that, I just wish that the people who still work at those companies have another option. And so the root of this is that life is so freaking short. Yeah. And a lot of times we can get so caught up in the work that we have, because the work that we do is like money solves. In the world that we live in, you have to have money in order to do anything, like to have a roof over your head, to have food in your fridge, to do anything. Yeah. And a lot of people will stay in positions in which drains their soul to maintain safety and maintain security. Yeah. And they won't take on any risk, and they won't put themselves out there, and they won't do anything because they don't want to blow this opportunity, because they have all these problems that need to be solved with money. And I think that there's a better way.
There is a better way.
Yeah. So, well, basically, I would prefer if people were nicer to each other.
There it is. Be nicer.
Yeah. Like seriously. And I really, and I understand as to like why people are not. And I understand that like, you know, you don't have a good night of sleep, and like somebody cut you off on the road, and like we don't always have the tools required to decrease the amount of stress that we experience, and we take it out on others. But I think that the ways that we can like mitigate that being an exorbitant issue is by maintaining an environment that you look forward to showing up to. 100%. And so like our team, there's nothing that I look forward more to than our team's morning wins. Yeah. And just being able to like, we do acknowledgements every morning of like, this person did a great job doing this thing. And that team, you can't touch it.
Yeah. It's
like,
untouchable.
Yeah.
It really is. My favorite part is the gratitude. Once a month, you get everybody on there and we all talk of gratitude about each other and what we really enjoy. But you're 100% correct. It's like, you tagged this earlier, and I was going to bring you back to it, but we got so far. So I'm going to bring you back now about the mind, right? At the end of the day, like somebody driving to work gets cut off, This happens. They step in dog shit when they walk outside. Their daughter pees down their leg while they're trying to carry her to the toilet to get. And it happened to me this morning. I was trying to carry Otter. I was trying to carry Otter into the fucking toilet as fast as possible to go pee this morning. Got pissed everywhere, all over me. But either way, something happens, right? And our minds are ever meaning-making machines, and so we're constantly creating these stories. And from those stories, we got to understand this. From those stories, stress is created. Mm-hmm. And then from that stress, we take that stress out on others. Mm-hmm. And so going back, right, and this is essentially what you're saying, creating environments to where we don't put up with that. I noticed that, like, somebody will bring up something negative that happened, and you'll go, no, that's not what we're talking about. Positive, right? And so now people are just trained to come in positively. It's a different environment that creates that. It makes them take all of their stories that they were thinking and get them out the window. So when they come to work, it's actually an escape from the stress. It's really crazy, but that's exactly what's happening if you look on a larger level. And so it's super cool to be able to, right when you turn that on, boom, 8 o'clock comes on, boom, all story out the window. We're living in the here and now, what's going on, positivity, and the environment's just so beautiful. That's why it's unfuckable with. That's why it can't be touched, right? And so talking to people a little bit more about the ever meaning make machine of the brain and the stories we tell. Can you go deeper on that? Because you mentioned it earlier and I wanted to bring it back up. It's a great way to just keep this thing going. Yeah.
I think sucky things do suck. And so to just say that, like, negative things, like to look at like the story of your daughter, like, sure, you could frame that positively and just be like, well, dude, how nice is it that you have a daughter? Like, of course. Yep. But there's also times in which it's like, well, now you got pee on you, and like nobody likes having pee on you. But like to be able to be resilient in that moment and just be like, to see it for what it is, rather than to have it snowball into bigger things of like. So I look at this like pee on, not to pick on you, but like if somebody got peed on, then it's like, that's definitely like a circumstance that is outside of the ideal or what you had planned. And so like car problems, all these problems that come up, they're daily hassles more than they are actual problems. And the more weight that we put onto them dictates how much of a problem they actually are. And so when people are faced with like, oh no, like X happened, and then it's the story attached to it. Whereas I just take the approach of X happened and this occurred, and now I have to solve for it. And so the more that you can just stay observational rather than positive, I find to be a lot more realistic in terms of like the 0 to 1 of, I think it's very difficult for people to go with like the high stress, high anxiety, whatever, to immediately positive. And I think that like asking them to make that jump of like everything is great all of the time, one, it's not true, and two, I just see this as like daily hassles do occur, and sucky things do suck, and that's okay. And so everybody has negative things that occur, everybody has problems, but keeping them rational, I think, is the most beneficial way to handle them. And so what I just mean by that is like observational, of like, rather than taking the approach of attaching any sort of meaning to yourself and who you are, your character, your lack of ability to accomplish something, you just look at it as, this thing happened. I will now do this thing and I will adjust accordingly. And so I take that approach as like a 0 to 1. And then from there, you can talk about framing things as more of a positive, and you can look at like, well, how everything becomes an opportunity. And so like this situation this morning, I would just say is like, gosh, like how cool you have a daughter. Yeah. Like if I really wanted to create like a positive emotional frame on it, that would be the frame that I would take. It's just the susceptibility that people have to that after they've spent years being reinforced for negative talk, I think is very difficult to do. And so I even just take the approach of like, instead of labeling things as horrible, what if we just say they're inconvenient? As just like a step more close to like rational language.
Where it's at,
yeah. And so then it's like, oh, this inconvenient thing that happened, or now I'm inconvenienced and I will do this, or I could go on. But the point that I get at though is that like, if you really want to be like I love the frame. There's this episode of Friends. Alec Baldwin played this character who was like overly positive. It's a great clip. It's like 3 minutes. Definitely check it out. And he's like overly positive about each situation of like, super hyperbolic of like, oh gosh, like look at the room and the lights and the beauty and it's like that gets exhausting for you and others around you as well. And so I think that there is this step of like, you can look at a waterfall and be like, this is the most beautiful waterfall I've ever seen. I'm grateful for this moment. Awesome. So I basically I take the stance of like, it goes both ways of like, you don't have to frame negative things as beautiful, but I highly recommend you attach less of a negative opinion to negative things. And then that way you at least like stay in the confines of reality. And when you stay in the confines of reality, you can handle reality rather than handle the stories. Yeah. And that I find to be very useful. Yeah.
I always try to like do something fun with it. So like this morning when I got peed on me, first I set her on the toilet and she still got like maybe like a 1/10 of her pee went in the toilet. So
great.
I clapped for her and I was like, yeah.
Nice.
And then I walked in and I rubbed the pee on her mom. I was like, John, her pee on me. I was just trying to get a reaction. So I always try to like take something and make fun of it. Yep. You know what I mean? That's what I try to do, because I think the second that you have that reframe, the second that you can reframe something, the second you don't remember it the same way.
Yeah,
the second
agreed.
It doesn't allow you to create a story.
Yep.
Right? Your new story is mom getting mad now I get to play with mom, you know what I mean? In the
yep.
morning. Yeah, so that's always what I've done. Well, today's episode's been amazing.
Well, hang on.
Go ahead.
We're gonna flip the script for a second.
All right.
How are you? You hydrated?
Yeah.
I got a couple questions.
Go ahead, let's do it. I love this.
So I don't know if you've talked about it on your podcast, but I would love to hear what have been, so earlier this year you broke your back.
Yeah.
What were some of the lessons that you learned as you were not able to do the things that like you had normally been doing?
That I could depend on people way more than I ever thought. I think as an entrepreneur, we go into business or life or whatever, and we embrace accountability at another level that most humans, I don't believe, understand. And so with that being said, I was going through life and always thought I had to have my hands in everything, what was doing it, like all of that. Mm-hmm. And when I got hurt, I wasn't able to. And I think it was the first time in my life in which I got physically to a place in which there was no way I could keep up. And so I had to let a lot of stuff go. And the great thing is when you actually care about people and you love people and you breathe love in them because that's what you want. You want what's best for them. And something happens to you, they show up in the same. They show back up with love. They show back up with support and they take care of stuff. And so for my business, when I hurt my back, you know as well as I do, it didn't just survive. It thrived without me. It grew by 36%. And so and maybe that was a little bit of me micromanaging and letting go of the micromanaging. That's the love in which I breathed into others that wanted to come back and breathe that into me and give back that support. But that was one of the biggest lessons I learned, is just keep people around you in which you can breathe love into. And if you're loving on them, depend on them, because they will show up for you. I promise you they will. Everybody that's in your company right now, if you're breathing, if you're positively reinforcing them, if you actually care about them and you're setting goals with them and you're helping them achieve higher growth in life, and something happens to you, they'll keep showing up. They'll make sure you're okay too. And I think that's just us as humans. We love to be support for others. As long as they've supported us, right? I go back to, when I was a kid, some of the most love that I ever felt, I was actually, because I was given up for adoption when I was younger. And I go back to like 9th grade, and I was playing baseball, and I was a catcher on a baseball team, and mom wasn't there, dad wasn't there, aunt and uncles weren't there, but I had this cousin named Shelly, girl, right? She's a softball player, but she showed up to every fucking game I had. Every game, and she'd sit behind the backstop. I was the catcher, and she'd always just root me on and always just be there. Most love I ever felt in my life, right? Didn't give me any money, no monetary stuff, nothing like that. Just showed up and just supported me, right? And I'm telling you right now, if something happened to her, I haven't talked to her in 15 years. Something happened to her, I'd fucking fly out there and I'd go do the absolute best I could in my life to help her kids, anything going on there. And so I think sometimes there's a lot of growth in letting go, and there's a lot of growth in trusting those in which you have around you. There's a lot of growth there, and a lot of business owners don't understand that, and so they just hold on so tight. You see so many business owners that wear all the hats still today. They're 30 years in business. They're still wearing all the hats, and I'm like, it's a trust issue, right? It's a trust issue. And so sometimes and it's not for everybody. There's probably people around you in which don't take it that seriously, but and it's not their fault. It's because you didn't support them. Understand that it always comes back to us no matter what. But I think with me breaking my back, it changed my leadership style. And so that was probably one of the biggest lessons I learned from there. The other lesson I learned is, once again, and I didn't learn this, but it reinforced it, right? It took it from a value of mine to a pillar of mine, and that's how important environment is. And so when your back's broke and you're laying in your house and you're laying back and a lot of negative, a lot of pain, a lot of things going on to you constantly, at first I got extremely depressed, right? Like extremely depressed. Like you get the stories start coming up, things start happening. You see me, I try to show up to the meetings, but I was there, but not there. And I'm just like, I'm trying to be in those environments. And I realized I had to do more and more of those environments. So it's weird. In my downest times, I started reaching out and finding more mentors and more areas I could surround myself in different environments, just so I could take in more and more information and be around positive people that were doing positive things. And instead of me showing up just to learn for myself, I started showing up for them. And I went like, okay, I got a mentor, but what can I do for him? How can I? And so I started putting my mind into that and started doing all that kind of stuff. And it extremely paid off. So those are the two biggest things. Trust those people that are around you that you've loved, that you've put positive reinforcement into, to do their job, and stop micromanaging them, and your company will thrive. And number 2, always be in good environments. Find good environments. No matter how much pain you're going through, those good environments will help you pull out of it.
Nice. I have a couple more questions.
Yeah,
I'll preface this one by saying, so over the past 2 years of working together, one of the most valuable lessons that you've taught me, I literally get goosebumps as I ask this question. One of the most valuable lessons that you've taught me is the concept of emotional investment. And so, yeah, compensation's great, but when you think about like your leadership style and the emotional investments that you make into your team, there's no book on like what makes this a good emotional investment. You just go above and beyond for the people on your team. And so I'll tell a story. I'll tell a couple to add some color to this. But so just to tail off of this back issue, is that somebody on our team recently experienced a back problem, and you sent your chair halfway across the country to support that person and give them everything that they needed. And like, there's no script for that. That is just like you seeing an opportunity to support somebody, to invest into them emotionally, and like go really above and beyond. Like no other boss that I would ever think of would ever think of doing something like that. So there's that. There's also a time in which I was going through a large transition in my life, and you took me to paradise and you poured into me. And like, I remember like we didn't talk a whole lot, but I had everything that I needed, and just like staring out at the water and just thinking of like, I'm in a good spot. And so when you see opportunity to take emotional investments into people and you always take it, where does that come from? And how do you think that other leaders can think in the same way that you do?
Yeah, I think a lot of times as a business owner, and this was true for me too up until probably 7 years ago, when we bring people into our business, all we think about is profit and finance and all that kind of stuff. And so it's not that you don't love the people, it's not that you don't connect with the people, but you're missing a huge component. And it's the biggest component, and that's called growth. And so what do I mean by that? I believe that the way that this world works, and I know this for a fact, is that first comes growth. And so if somebody's growing, that's the best that they ever feel, right? And so helping your team and the people around you become clear on their growth. And it doesn't matter if it involves your company or not your company. Just be a good fucking human being and help them with their growth. Where are they trying to go? Guide them correctly. If it's in the good direction, let them go. Let them go that direction and guide them to it, right? If it's in your company and you can somehow align your company with their growth, then do that. But most people, and just give you examples, I've coached so many business owners like this, right? And so what happens is like, you know, they're so busy on their own path to where they're climbing, right? And they're climbing up this fucking mountain, and you know, their wife's a stay-at-home wife. Maybe they have a couple kids that they're not going to their football games and they're not supporting them in their stuff, right? And they're growing, and they get up to this pinnacle, and they look back and they go, Josh, I don't know why, but I'm supporting my wife. She's a stay-at-home mom. I'm supporting my kids. They have everything they fucking need. They have this, but I can't get no support of where I'm at, right? And I go, slow the fuck down. Slow it down. Go back. Ask them. I usually ask them, well, should your wife be a stay-at-home wife? Is there something else that she wants to do in her life? Have you ever focused or cared about what they want? Because the second we focus and care about what they want, and then we positively reinforce it, and then we connect with them, and then they get that growth, now you have somebody that when you start growing is going to positively reinforce you, right? And so when I look at humans as humans, not as human capital. And I think that's a huge difference. Most business owners are looking at each person in their company as a profit margin, as human capital. And they're not human capital, they're fucking humans. So treat them like humans first. And then once we have that growth, once we understand their growth and we see that it aligns with our company, then let's take them to where they're trying to go. What's their financial goal that they're trying to hit? What's the things that they're trying to do, right? And so I think because I focus on growth first and try to understand their growth, then I can support them and I love on them like the person that hurt their back. I understand her growth, and so I'm so much more invested in her to where when she hurts, I hurt, in all honesty. And so I want to solve that. I want to help solve that pain. I want to put her in a better environment. I want to try to get her comfortable so that she can rehab and feel good about what she's doing, right? But it's that growth piece that most people are missing. And so they miss it in their personal lives because they're chasing something. They miss it in their business lives because maybe their general manager, they love it and connected. Hey, Sarah, great job today, all that kind of stuff. But does Sarah even want to work for you? Or are you imprisoned her? And I don't imprison people. I don't believe in it. And so you talked a little bit about this earlier with Amori and you trying to unshackle people that are stuck in a graphic design job, but you're getting yelled at every day. If their growth doesn't align with what I have going on, I would rather pay them $10,000 to go pour their growth than to keep them in my company for another 3 months. It's going to cost me way more money. Does that make sense? And so I just look at things differently, and I'm not missing the piece of growth. And if we go back and we focus on other people's growth, we'll have the support to take us to where we're trying to go. And we're aligned with the people that want to go there with us. And that's so important. And so that's where my leadership comes from.
Hell yeah. My last question.
I thought I was interviewing you on here.
That's what happens when you bring a sales guy onto a podcast. So with all these questions aside, how do you my last question is, you invest into yourself, you work with many mentors, you read a ton. You take a lot of courses, you're an avid learner. You're always looking to like develop, to grow. What filter do you put what somebody else says through what is useful to you?
I used to read everything and watch everything and do all that kind of stuff. I'm actually a little bit more, unless it pertains to a specific thing in which I'm trying to achieve right now, I usually don't intake it. Furthermore, if I haven't researched the person and actually respect the knowledge in which they have, I don't consume it. And so if you see me doing something, it's because I've already researched the person. I already know their success rate. I already respect them as a person and a human in a specific area. And I want to keep this very legit with you guys. You can't, for instance, there's areas in which I respect Tony Robbins and there's areas in which I don't. And so I will listen to certain things that come out of him in those specific areas that I know that he has experienced, etc. And so that's the way that I filter things now, right? Back in the day, I feel like I just jammed information as much information as I possibly could get. And I realized that it was changing my beliefs so often on different things that I was never consistent as a leader. And so I had to start filtering the things in which I allowed in from the people that I respected in those specific areas. But now I don't just go out and randomly read a book anymore or randomly go for a podcast or anything like that. I'm more in a creative space now, to where I'm spending all my time going, what can I create? How can I do that? Like, I love that space. And so I spend most of my time creating. The time I do spend consuming is on specific issues. Like, we had an issue with one of our managers this morning with the certain stuff. So to me, it was like, I helped him separate it and kind of see through it. So I don't think it was a big deal, but if it became a big deal, then I would have like looked for books on that specific subject and how I could help him. But first I'd have to go back and go, who do I respect in this area? And you hear all the time, like even this morning you heard the other manager that was on there, the other guy with us, and he was like bringing up, well, I already went through this and read this and did this. And I was like, yeah, but I don't respect those people. So I don't care if you got that information from there. I don't respect it, so I'm not going to take that information. You see what I mean? So I block out anything that I haven't done research already myself for. And then sometimes you make bad decisions there as well. Like, you'll take in information, you're like, shit, and then you'll read some shit down the road. But let's just I'll just keep it real. A lot of it's coming back anymore to philosophy. You go back to like I think almost everything can be answered back there. And so it's like, I try to go to the old books at anymore. And then I try to give myself enough time to think, because almost always I have the answer. And so if I can get space to do so, I'll usually come up with a reasonable, or rational, answer, for those things that will definitely move us forward a lot quicker, right? Get you out of story and get you moving forward. So my filter realistically anymore is just like, understand who you're learning from, and like, don't take it lightly. This isn't fucking high school.
Yeah.
Right?
One thing that I've noticed is that one value that you display is humor.
Yeah. I love laughter.
Like, oh man, I don't know if there's nothing that brings you more in the moment than laughing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And, as an observation that I've made in working with you for 2 years is that anybody who takes themselves seriously, you reject.
100%.
Anybody who cannot laugh at themselves, it's just no chance.
Yeah.
What are you hiding?
100%. Because let's just keep it real. We think we know everything. We know nothing.
Nothing.
We know nothing, and that's what keeps me learning, right? But I feel like I learn more being creative than I learn in consuming information anymore. And so there's a different type of learning that goes on. And so I try to stay in that creative space, because that's where like it's a lot of testing and science, right? Data, and it's your data, and so it can't be fucked with. You're like, no, I did this test. This didn't come from a book from 1982, and then I need to go back and research who did it, and then find out it was fucking funded by Pfizer. You know what I mean? And so I try to take that shit not serious and try to look at something and go, let me get my own rat. Let me test that myself. Let me see if that actually comes out the same way for me. And so that's the way. Then I feel like that's the creative side of me, is like, no, I want to go and check that hydrogen. I'm gonna do this next week. But you ever heard of zinc and then hydrogen? Yep. If you drop zinc and hydrogen, you can put a balloon over the top of it, and then it's supposedly like fills up with hydrogen, and you tie it off. But you can put a 30-foot line to it and then light it, and it's like this huge bomb that goes off.
Oh damn!
And so I'm gonna test it next week here when you're not here. But I just want to test it, because like you see these things, and it's like most people just go, yeah, this works, and you believe it, and then you'd go and live your life off of what you read in a book. But then a lot of these things, guys, I go and test, and they don't come out the same. Yeah. And you're like, okay, let me try again. After 10 times of trying and it doesn't come out, you go, that book was bullshit. Like, that thing was bullshit, right? So I think a lot of where I come from anymore is just not believing a lot of what I've read in the past. And so I spend a lot of time going back and proving things false or true, because a lot of what you're living, and you don't know this, but a lot of what you're living is a lie anyway. And so unless you test it yourself, how are you to ever know?
Yeah.
And so you're basing a lot of your shit on a rocky foundation.
Seeking things that are the least amount of wrong.
Yeah.
Nice. What would you say if you were to go back, you're starting your first business? You were 24 when you started your first business?
Yeah. 24, 23, 24. Yep. 24.
Okay.
Yep.
So you just, so it's like a blip in time. 24-year-old you appears like right here.
Yeah.
And you just go, hey, handsome.
Yeah.
And then you get one sentence. What do you tell them?
They said, hey, handsome. Explain that to me again.
He just said hello. I don't know.
Oh,
he just teleported through time. Like he's going to be confused.
It was like me, or was it this?
Yeah, it's you. Yeah.
And I'm just talking to myself?
Yep. 24-year-old you, and he's you get one sentence before he falls back in time.
Fuck, this is great. Holy shit.
I dressed up a pretty good scenario.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Actually, I could probably think on this all day. I think the thing that would have helped me grow the most, make no decision on emotion. Because you're so emotional going through your 20s and your 30s, and you make so many emotional decisions, and then you look back and you go, that was all a waste of time. If I could have got rid of emotion quicker and not made decisions, not that you need to get rid of emotion, because love is great. Like there's so many good emotions, but not made decisions based on emotion and emotion alone.
Excellent.
And if I would have done that, I don't know where the fuck I'd be. I'd probably be with Elon Musk flying rockets to fucking Mars, bro.
Awesome.
Well,
I
we're
feel
going to
good.
wrap this up, but before we do, I want Steve to give you his absolute best sales pitch on Amori sales. And so, you want to fuck with me on some questions? Here you go, Steve.
Okay.
So why, if somebody is stuck at the job, Steve, and they're a web developer, let's call them Elijah, and their boss is yelling at them all the time, and they're unhappy, but they're making $3,500, $4,000, $5,000 a month, and that's their comfort level. They got their apartment, their car's paid for, right? Why should they come over and learn a new skill? Why should they join you in Amori sales?
Because you already have everything you need to have everything you want. And I have hundreds of data points to prove that I know how to access what you already have to get you closer to what you want. And so the main thing that I wish to communicate is that you will be in an environment in which you will access the language that you need in order to have the life that you want. And I think that if you don't join, fine. If you do join, the life that you want is like 2 sentences away. It's really really close. And so I whatever story you're telling yourself, and the story that if you've made it this far, you're probably past the point of thinking, oh man, this dude with a man bun has the ability. Isn't he a little too old for a man bun? He's like, he has the ability to help me get what I want. It's like I have, and honestly, likely, I have enough data to support that I can do that. So I would love to. The main reason is that my sales pitch is if you come to me, I get to live the life that I would like to have. And so selfishly, I just want to help more people have more fun. And I think a lot of people like to have fun.
I think everybody loves to have fun.
I think it's built within us, honestly.
Yeah.
This was a ton of fun.
Yeah, this is great. I loved it. All right, if you want to check out Steve, go to amoresales.com, AMORE sales.com.
Can't drop this one.